Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. So we are in the swing of things. We are moving toward those wonderful days of fall. I love fall, but summer is saying
Hold on, since when?
Summer and fall I love. It's the other days. It's the spring and the winter.
You're the one that when it starts dropping below 70, oh, it's too cold. That's you, right?
Well, isn't this fall though? Like 85 to 87?
No, this isn't fall.
Oh wow.
We're not there yet.
Not there yet.
No.
So it gets cold.
Remember when it was like 60 degrees out?
Well, I just thought fall started in September, so I'm loving this fall weather that we're getting here. It's 85 and 86 and 87, and I can live with this kind of weather. It's just like you said, when we get below the 70s, I'm done with it. I want to move to my own tropical island somewhere in the Pacific Southwest, but we're here today. So I'm in the studio, as you can hear by that very abrasive interjection. With
I gotta
John
call
D.
it like I see it there.
Hey, I'm glad John and I haven't had the opportunity to be together for a while because we have been having to make adjustments on recording times. John is all over. He has come in as a student intern, initially as an intern and part-time, and now he's basically running the entire station. So his time is he's no longer just the low man on the totem pole. So we have to figure out when we can get in with John. But I'm glad to have him in the studio. Great to see you today, John. In person. How are you doing, John B? In the place to be?
I'm doing good.
Okay, he's doing
hello.
good. Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Okay, he is doing well. I can tell your energy was a lot different. I was like, so John's in a good mood today. Okay, because you know how we black people are now. I'm just joking. I come in at CP time all the time. But I'm doing better because today I apologize for being a little bit tardy. But anyways, for those of you who are listening to us out there at WSGW, and I know it's a whole bunch of people like, why do you say that? Because I'm honest. Listening to us via WSGW, both 100.5 and on our AM dial, we certainly thank you for continually listening in for this conversation. Today, we're going to have a real serious conversation. I know I'm starting on a little bit silly. We're going to talk about the interesting and the complex cross sections of race and identity and gender and how they play a role. And Jonathan was reeling on me saying, yeah, this is a very deep, heavy conversations that you're just throwing at me, but it's going to be lighthearted. I promise you it's going to be fun. As lighthearted as we get into what's hot off the press, the debates. We got to talk about.
I can't communicate. Eye rolling.
No. Those who are in social media understood exactly what you just said. But for those who are tuning in, I just got the master eye roll. I didn't even know you could do that, Jonathan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's talk a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the debate. I think it's important. There's a lot that is happening in the world that's around us. But I think that we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about what's happening in the debate. The world is talking about it. I just thought it was funny for a number of reasons, and we'll talk about that. When we talk about funny, we'll segue from the debate to some of the other headlines that are out there. But Jonathan, overall, what were your initial thoughts of what is most likely going to be the only presidential debate that we'll have in this season?
I didn't watch or listen to the whole thing, but I watched probably half of it, maybe a little bit more than that. And I thought,
you're so much better than me because I watch it once and then I watch it like 3 other times. And I'm like, did I catch any? I'm looking for everything, but go ahead.
I thought Kamala Harris did very well.
Okay.
I thought, as far as debates go, she won that. And I was thinking about it after, like, kind of processing it. I'm like, well, she was, what was it? She prosecuting attorney. So like, of course she did. That's got to be her kind of venue.
You know what was interesting about that though is that was the narrative that they had painted. She is the prosecutor. She's going to prosecute, and you can see where that was a benefit.
Yeah. My one criticism of her is she wouldn't engage with what was being talked about, with what Trump talked about. It's a criticism and kind of the only strategy you have when you're up against Donald Trump. Don't talk about what he's talking about, because
talk about something different.
talk about what you want to talk. So I got a question for you, Kareem, on this.
Absolutely.
What do you think the purpose of that debate was?
I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Okay.
I think that if we look at it, debates are really about it's about how you appear, really. I can't remember in any debate where there was any substantive policy that was unrolled you don't get that kind of time, right? But it's really about how you position yourself and how you look to the American people. And I'll say this for both of them, because I think that's a great question. I think for Donald Trump, the debate was about not looking unhinged. It was about looking, because that is the narrative that people are trying to drive on the other side. He's unhinged.
It's
he's
an
crazy.
opportunity for him to look presidential.
So both sides are fighting to look presidential. For him, it was that he's not going to be unhinged. He's not going to be rude. He's not going to be sexist and race. All of these things that we hear the left talk about, right? So he's going to come in. He's going to be poised. And I'm going to tell you, I think one of the great things for him that works in his favor is when the mics aren't on. Because this is the thing that I think that the Democratic Party, I don't know if they picked it up or not, but I know that the Democratic Party has often said that he's unhinged, but he only goes there when there is a large crowd and when he gets the feedback. He's an entertainer. And so a part of who he has been his entire life, when we look at The Apprentice, he loved the fact when he said, "You're fired," and people would jump, "Oh, we love it when you say it, please say it." And so that is the thing about his crowds that energizes him, and that's why he goes off message. So having the mics muted was something that I thought was good for him in that regard. And likewise, Kamala Harris, she wanted to seem presidential. She didn't want to seem weak. You saw her almost like run across the stage to shake his hand. "I'm not afraid of you." And those are policies of strength. Now, I think that there's always a balance for women who are in politics against men. You want to seem strong, but you don't want to come off as the B word, and be a little itchy. And so I think that that was one of the things. And then also, she didn't want to seem aloof and a Californian, if you get what I'm saying, where, the big money people and they're surfers and they're super far left and they want to hug a tree. So she had to make it seem as though she was middle of the road, concerned about, America, and she's the candidate of change, which is so very interesting. And if I were to ask you a question, do you think that it's weird? And I don't know, weird is a question. It's interesting how she is positioning with no objection to for the most part, of being a candidate of change. Is that interesting to you, or does that seem?
What do you mean? You think like she's trying to say, "I'm going to come in and change all these things"?
Like, I'm a candidate of change. We're going to turn the pages on what has been to what.
It's stupid. She is currently the vice president. She sits as chair of the United States Senate and has for 3 years now. If you're going to change something, it's opening yourself up for that attack.
Okay, but this is what I'm saying. That's exactly what she's saying.
Yeah,
that's exactly what she said, and there was no pushback whatsoever about that. And so I guess that was interesting. That's interesting to me. That was very, very interesting to me, because I'm like, there's no way that you are the incumbent vice president of the current administration. Can you run as a candidate for change? But they're allowing her to take that space without any, surrogates are saying it, but we don't hear that at the top of the ticket for the Republicans. And so I just thought that was interesting how that began to take place. Go ahead.
And it's because people don't like Biden. And once they dropped him, they dropped him. And it's no longer the Biden-Harris administration. This is the Biden administration. The Harris administration is what's on the ticket right now.
And that came up. It's funny because I've come to an understanding of something. Sometimes you can not like someone for the purpose of what you're doing. Hey, they're on this side and we're on this side. We can go after, go have a drink or whatever they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it appears to me that like Donald Trump really does not like Joe Biden. And because he started talking about it, and she's like, "I'm not Joe, I'm Kamala. You're running against Kamala." But he has I think he's become a creature of habit, and he's just become so accustomed. He's still getting used to the fact that there's a different person on the other side of that ticket.
It's because it helps him to equate Kamala to Joe.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, pointing out that it is still the Biden-Harris administration right now. If he can tie Kamala Harris to the anchor that is Joe Biden.
But wouldn't it be better to say, Kamala, you and Joe? He doesn't put her name in it. He says Joe Biden is this, and Joe Biden did this, and Joe Biden, and he said, and he doesn't finish it with, and you are a part of the same Joe Biden administration. If I'm debating, I'm coming for the jugular.
Yeah,
like Joe Biden is this, and he's done this, and you look at our interest rates, and they're this, and you're a part of the same administration. You're running as a candidate of change. What planet are you on? That's what my response would be. But it just seems like he's allowing her that space, and it's interesting that it's happening. And I'll tell you another thing that's interesting, and this is from the Democratic side as we talk about this debate. I think it's interesting how throughout the entire debate, Donald Trump used the term border czar on several occasions. She never said, "I'm not the border czar," even though it's been debunked she wasn't the border czar, but it's a terminology saying that you are the king of the border. You're owning it. That's your throne. And there's not been any pushback from that concept. And so I thought that was really interesting.
It's because that's a losing issue. So if you're going to lose, you deny it.
You just don't want to address it at all, right?
Exactly, 100%.
I think you address it. I think it's and I would. Well, she did at one point throw the bill that he got his people to overthrow or to shoot down, that was done 6 or 7 months ago. Anyways, all in all, what did you think? What did you learn that you did not know about these two candidates?
Like I said, I was impressed that Kamala Harris performed as well as she did.
I was surprised.
I expected a lot more goofiness, which is kind of what she shows in almost every other context.
It's what the media, the media that's trying to portray her shows her like, oh, this was my bill, and or she's dancing, and so I think I was surprised because she was a lot more measured and controlled. I hate when she's smiling all the time, and I think that's one of the things that you're saying. But her smiles were purposeful. One of the things that came up, and this is where it was going to be a segue to the craziness of this campaign. Not just the cat ladies, but now there is this whole thing, and I heard number 45, former President Trump, talk about it, and that is with they're eating cats and dogs.
I love all the memes that have come out of this. It's so good.
They're eating cats and dogs, and they're eating your pets. I thought I was gonna fall out and pass. I was like, I'm not hearing this in a presidential debate. What did you think when you heard that, Jonathan?
Stupid. It's just kind of one of those. He's trying to do the thing where he's looking for the cheer. He's looking for the boos. He's looking for the crowd reaction. There's no crowd there, Donald.
That does not play to his favor, because that's what gets him ramped up. Now, whether it would get him on a tangent where he'll get a ton of zingers out of it, because one thing that he is very quick-witted when he has an audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he often goes off message. And one of our listeners said that one of the things that they liked or they did not like was the fact that the moderator kept referring to him as President Trump. I understood it, because at one point this man was president, and for the entire 4 years of his presidency, you're with President Trump. He's a president, so he's going to be a President Trump forever. So that didn't bother me as much, because she was Vice President Kamala Harris. That's what her role was, her highest level of role. And I was always taught you refer to a person based upon the highest level or the highest role or office that they've had. So that didn't bother me. I know there were a lot of people that were upset about that, but that didn't bother me. So as we talked about the dog, so the next day, this is what's interesting. We're going to get going because I want to get into our conversation today. The next day, he was talking about how he had won the election and would he do this and that and the other. And what about that crazy conversation you had about people who eat, dogs and their cats being eaten? He goes, oh, yeah, and they're eating the ducks. He says, they're eating the ducks. And I about lost it. I'm like, what do you mean they're eating the ducks? He goes, in the parks.
I will say, leading up to the debate, in the days before the debate, there were reports of Haitian migrants taking ducks out of parks, and nothing about dogs or cats that I saw anyway. But I did see stuff about ducks being taken out of parks.
And so maybe that was him trying to course correct when he said, and yeah, and also they're eating the ducks, yeah, at the parks. And so maybe he was trying to course correct, but it just seemed kind of zany with no, with no commas or any separation. So it was now the dogs, the cats, the pets, and the ducks in the parks. And so like I'm laughing about that, but there is something that is very uncool about that as we talk about it. And I say this because when you say that migrants, the Haitian migrants are eating this, there's long been a standing conversation. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, about the treatment of what types of immigrants come across at our border, especially our southern border. And there's images that I think it was probably 2020 of Haitian migrants that were coming over that were turned around on horses, and they were being whipped in, and they were those that went
They
back.
were not. That was debunked.
Well, I'm just showing you what I saw with my own eyes on cameras, so they can debunk it. But when you see an image, seeing is believing. But was not debunked was that they were all put back on a plane and sent back to Haiti. And we saw that happen with Haitian migrants, and we've never seen that happen with other types of migrants before. And well, we haven't seen it, or it hasn't been as publicized. Not say that it has never happened, but there was seemingly to the eye, I'll say, this difference in how they were being handled. And many folks were believing that the difference was because they were from countries that were darker complexions. And so that kind of otherism is often picked up. You don't have to agree. I'm just telling you, I'm talking in generalizations.
Okay.
And so that type of otherism is attributed that these black folks are coming in, they're eating your dogs, your cats, and the geese out of the park. But go ahead.
I don't have any evidence to this. I'm not an expert in the subject, but my gut tells me that the differing treatment might have to do with the legitimacy of asylum claims, because a lot of people who are coming across the border are claiming asylum.
Mm-hmm.
And I would guess there are certain protocols of people from this country have this route to asylum.
Okay.
Whereas people from this country are much lower risk, like their country is a lot better off. So they're probably more likely to be sent back. That's just kind of my
and I can certainly understand it, but I also do understand that we are not lost to the things that are taking place in Haiti. When we look at people coming from Venezuela coming in, and they're saying, "Hey, our government is wicked. It's this, it's that," and they're doing these things. We see those things in Haiti, and so it's a real important conversation that I think that we need to look at. So I think that was the only issue with the cats and the dogs. That was kind of crazy. All right, so now let's move on into the hysterics of this political season, because your guy JD Vance, and I'm saying you're a guy, and then I'm not saying you're a guy. I'm just joking. Whenever I don't want to claim somebody, I always tell the other person it's your guy. Your guy JD Vance, with his single childless cat lady conversation, which keeps on giving and just never seems to stop. What do you think? Because at the end of this this debate, we have Taylor Swift, which I'm confused by the fact of why so many people are like, "Oh, Taylor Swift said this." She comes out and she she says that she is voting for Kamala Harris and Waltz, and that she, and she signs her little declaration on her X account as the childless bearing Catwoman or something of that nature. What are your thoughts about that, and why do you think people are so enamored with what she has to say about politics?
One, because it's idolatry.
Let's get straight to it.
It's a thing in America. We idolize. We idolize. That's the word. We idolize celebrities, and it's borderline worship at this point with much of American society. So when a celebrity comes out and says, "I think I'm going to vote for this person, and I think they have it right," if you agree with them, you say, "Yes, yes, they've got it right. They're on our side. They're one of us in this great struggle. And if you're against them, you say, I don't care. What do I care what that crazy cat lady
what
has
they have
to
to
say?
say doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what's interesting though, because I'll tell you this, what it made me think of, someone said something about this. I was like, oh my gosh, like I am getting so old. When I think it was President Clinton, maybe it was the 80s, could have been Barack Obama, one of those Democratic presidents. I think it was President Clinton, where they came out with the concept of rock the boat. And have you ever heard that before?
I've heard of it in a very, very different context. So, no.
This is a generational issue. But anyways, they were coming up with this idea of rocking the vote, right? And the rock the vote idea was that they were using celebrities, entertainers, and television celebrities to come out, and they were rocking the vote. So they had this huge concert, and Obama did this again, but I think it was Clinton that initially did it. And so, like, when you come in with your "I voted" sticker, Mr. Wise Old Man that everyone seems to think that you are, you come in with your "I voted" sticker, and you would get free entrance to this mega concert, which was kind of like I don't know, Lollapalooza. What's the other one? Woodstock. Where they got all of these folks coming out here. Okay. Coachella. And if you came in with it was Clinton. Thank you very much. And when you came in with your "I voted" sticker, they would give you free admission to this concert. And so it was interesting because I thought, like, so is Taylor going to be a silent surrogate, or is she just voting? She was very controlled with how she positioned what she said. I did my research. This is who I am voting for. Not to say that, hey, I think you should vote for this person, but why don't we get back to those things? And this is not even about Democratic or Republic, but it's just about the beauty of inspiring young people to get out and get involved in this amazing civic arena and getting them to vote. Getting back to having concerts with these celebrities, and you show your I voted thing. Yeah, one of the listeners said Diddy had a vote or die thing. Yeah, no one wants to talk about Diddy. Diddy is bad news. We don't refer. Who's that? You mean Mr. Love? Yeah, we don't refer to Diddy anymore. Nobody wants to deal with the diddler. But they used to have these crazy, huge concerts, and they would encourage young people not only to register, so they would have them to register. Then they would have these massive ones when they voted to come and show their "I voted" sticker, and they would get into these things. I think those things are great for young people to get involved. There's also another thought that I had was about like hack the vote, where now kids are into coding and programming. Why aren't we having hackathons for voting conversations?
Kids aren't that into coding and programming.
What are you talking about? The world loves it.
It's not fun,
but it can be.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's a part of it.
You're talking like an educator right now. This is like a teacher saying reading is fun.
No, but listen, I work with young Black and brown kids, and a part of what we do is we expose them to coding.
Yeah.
And that exposure has generated excitement. So you make it fun. You help them to make it a competition. When we make things competitions, kids get excited, especially when there's a prize. But I'm just talking about, okay, if you don't want to hack the code or hack the vote,
but some sort of event that encourages
those kinds of events. Because to me, what I'm not seeing in this particular election cycle is a real concerted effort by both sides, both Republicans and Democrats. They're voting and pandering to those that are young to get them to vote, but they're not really driving an excitement toward getting people involved in the process, getting folks who are 13, 14, and 15 aware, hey, when I turn 18 years old, or I turn 20, I can make sure that I'm ready to vote and I can be a part of the voting process. To me, that is one of the most amazing things that we have in this country, is our ability to cast our opinion through our vote. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Stick, stay, don't go away. We're going to get to the main conversation, United Shades of Gray. I'm going to become a rapper.
If you're going to become a rapper, you need to learn to hit times more closely.
Yeah, I saw that. I was off a couple seconds there.
I wouldn't mind, except editing this is literally the last thing for my week, and I want to go home.
So do you get to go home till when?
Monday.
Really?
Yeah.
Look at you getting the weekends. This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray. Today, we're going to be exploring the complex spectrum of racial identity and experience. Somebody saying, "What in the world is that about?" We're going to talk about how we perceive race, how race plays a major part in how we view people, how we categorize people, but also what are the things that we see, and we're going to focus really in on television, the things that we see in media that really impact how we view people, how we see people, and how we categorize people. So we'll get into that very interesting, intricate, multifaceted nature of race and identity in America. And we're going to move past just this regular, oh, they're black or they're white, this kind of thing. And we're going to talk about some of the things that I think that are really interesting and how human experience helps us to understand and shape race. And before we get started with that, getting into this, I want to get to that because we had a conversation during the debate and weeks before when Trump had visited. I think it was the National Association of Black Journalists, and one of the ladies asked number 45 about her being black, or I can't remember where it came from, and he said, "Black? I didn't know she was black. I thought she was Indian up until she started running for office, and then all of a sudden she became a black woman." And so there was this entire conversation about her being a black woman, and she's saying, "Hey, I'm a black woman." People are saying, "Hey, she went to an HBCU," and these are all pieces of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about race and gender and the intersection between the two of them, and how culture plays a role in how we view and identify things. So, she was saying, "Hey, I went to Howard University." Those of you who know what Howard is, it is a HBCU, a historically black college and university is what HBCUs are. And she says, "Hey, and I was an AKA, an Alpha Kappa Alpha, one of the sororities that is traditionally a historic part of Black America, right? The college and the educational experience." And so out of that, she began to define who she was. But the idea of and Trump, and I say this, and I didn't like it, and I don't like it, but in many ways, I think that there's many people who could say, "Hey, we see her mom. Her mom looks very Indian, and and many of her pictures, or look like she's from South Asia, India, somewhere of that nature." And so when you look at her, you would think that I think she looked like a black woman to me. She's like Auntie Kamala. But some people might say, okay, we thought her sister looks a little bit differently, more Asian features. And so I can see that conversation. And so when we look at that, we would say, okay, she is somewhat Asian. And she says, well, my father's Jamaican. And so it's like, okay, well, your dad is Jamaican, your mom is Indian. And so what does that make her? And so when we look at that and we look at race in America, Jonathan, how would you think that we define it? Because there's a definition that I have in terms of how we define people in the Black community. But I'm just curious. So if her dad is from Jamaica and she identifies as a black woman, but if her dad is from Jamaica and her mom is from Indian, how would you just kind of like in general sense, without her defining herself, how would you define her?
I don't care.
I mean, and this is just people. I'm not just talking about her.
I know what you
but
mean.
People in general.
This is where I run into a problem with the concept of race as a part of identity.
Okay.
And
I think that's good, but go ahead.
Because simultaneously, people are being told you cannot make judgments based on race, but you need to allow a person to identify themselves based on their race. And how someone identifies themselves factors into how I judge them.
Okay.
If someone comes out and says,
so based upon how an individual identifies himself determines how you judge them, I think
it factors into it.
Okay.
It's not the one thing. Obviously, how they act and how we interact has a big part to do with it. But someone who comes right out and says, "I'm an atheist who spends my free time volunteering at an abortion clinic."
Okay.
I disagree with that person, and I don't think very highly of them.
Okay.
If someone wants me to see that they are an African American atheist who, in their free time, volunteers at an abortion clinic. Okay, so you're telling me to factor in your race into how I see you. But at the same time, I can't make any judgments based on your race.
Okay, I don't necessarily see it that way. I understand what you're saying, but I'll say this, and I'll say this to your point. When people deal with me, because I have a lot of people that love me, right, that are not black, that happen to be of lighter persuasions or different nationalities, and they love me, right? And in our conversations, as a term or of or just reckoning their feelings toward me, they say, when I see you, I don't see race. I don't see, and people say that. I've had people say that to me all the time. Like, I don't see you as a black man. And I'm like, no, I need you to see me as a black man. I want you to see me as a black man. And I think that this is a part of being black in America. And I'll say it that way. Black in America is different than being black anywhere else, to me, in terms of how we view things, because of the history that we had, and because of the atrocity of the history. My affinity and my desire to represent a people who were downtrodden, but have had the ability to really just kind of be resilient and to come back and to add great value to a place and to a country that I love. There is a pride that comes from being Black American, if that makes sense, being an African American descendant of slaves. So I love the fact, I want you to see me as a black man. I want you to see I want you to notice the melanin kissed skin. I want you to notice, because that is such a rich part of my identity and who I am and the people that I represent, and the sense of pride that emerges from that. And so it's for no other reason, recognize me as a black man, not for the purpose of discrimination, but for the purpose of understanding the culture and who I am.
But if when I'm talking about someone else and I say, have you met Kareem Bowen?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. Tell me about him.
How would you describe me?
I would say he hosts a radio show. He's a pastor in the community. If I describe him, I understand we have a certain rapport. But if a white person says, well, he's black, and he's also these things, that's problematic.
Why is it problematic, though? I mean, like, why do you feel that it's problematic? Because I don't really think.
Well, why did you need to point out that he's black?
Well, because I'll tell you this: if I'm talking to someone and be like, "Hey, my producer," I'm like, "Yeah, he's this young white guy named Jonathan. He's super smart, really bright."
Why does it matter that I'm white?
Because I want people to be able to know exactly what I'm talking about. Because if they see me on the show and you're not,
why don't you describe me as tall?
I can describe you as tall
instead of. It's the same. It's a biological factor.
Or as one of our listeners is saying, "Oh, Kareem, the handsome black man." I often go for that one. Thank you very much. The handsome black man. Yes, I'll go for that one all the time. But no, I think that, I think that when we make it a problem, it becomes a problem. But the reality of it is, you're a white dude and I'm a black dude.
And I think people tend to make it a problem more often than not.
Really?
Yeah.
Just by identifying as such, because I think that we can identify that there is a difference, and there not necessarily be a difference. And I'll tell you, and I want to let me get into this next point, because I want to bring that into play. Because when we talk about cultural narratives, when we talk about how we are identified and the things that help us to become who we are and how we see each other, for a long time, media has played a very strong role in that piece, right? For years, Black folks were either a maid or they were butler or crime. I remember when I first met my roommates at Michigan State University, my suite mates on the other side, they were afraid of me because they had never seen a black person, and the only black people they had ever seen were the black people that were on TV, and they were all murderers and killers, and that was his understanding. But then when we were coming together, this is during, I'm about to date myself, during the Cosby Show era. And he began, as he hung out with me, we began to watch his show. He's like, how come we don't ever see more black people like that? This is Paul Penfold. This is how he talked. And I used to, how come we don't ever see more black people like that? I'm like, it's not, this is why we're excited about it. Because for the first time, media is being challenged to cast a different narrative than what has always been the narrative. And suddenly, if you're black and then you're in entertainment, where you didn't want to be typecast, the Cosby Show and shows like A Different World, which was a spinoff of the Cosby's, where it showed, African-American folks who had been able to go and get educated, and they're in school and they're sending their kids to school, it now becomes a great and a powerful thing to be Black in America, because we're seeing images in there and narratives that are much different than what we've seen before. And so when we look at like having those conversations, and that, I don't see anything bad about it. And I think that the bad thing is when there is a motive, I think, that is attached to having those conversations. And when I say motive, it can be a good motive. Hey, we want to have, this is Black, and we want to, make sure that we show some color differences. Some people may say diversity, or motive. We want to assign more people in this space, or to give them this opportunity because they're Black. And so people are sometimes moved by the motive, not by the necessarily just the fact, because we recognize the diversity in those races. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I don't think I agree with it.
Okay. Well, why not, sir?
Well, I disagree that. No, I agree with you that there's not a problem with it.
Right.
There's not a problem with you describing me as white. There's not a problem with me describing you as Black. It shouldn't matter. Is my take on it.
And I don't think that it does. I think that it is I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't think that it matters negatively. I'll say that.
I don't think it matters at all.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Why don't you think it matters at all?
Because you're a person and I'm a person.
And I think I think that once we get beyond those things, which you and I have, that
I would be more apt to describe someone based on what they do.
Well, no. Okay, let me give you a perfect example of why I think it matters. Okay, and where it matters in the world, whether we make it a thing or we don't make it a thing, right? And as we look at this, there's one thing, and we talk about the intersectionality between your race and your gender. Okay, so I am a Black person first, right? I'm a Black person. Who has a set of experiences and things that make me uniquely Black. Now, within my being a Black person, I am also a Black male person, right? So I'm a Black man. And in that, when I bring those two pieces together, and I know that there are some African-American women, Black women that are in the stream, when I bring those pieces together and I'm a Black man, Black separates my experiences from everyone that's not Black, right? So I can share with you the legacy, the stories, the history, the conversations that as a Black person we have in communications as it relates to things such as law enforcement. When you get pulled over by the cops, when you're walking in a community where white people, these are conversations that were real conversations that my family had with me because I was a Black man, right? And then when you look at the fact that you add this, you separate and you bring in the concept of gender. So now, because I am a Black man, there's a whole different set of conversations that mom and daddy and grandparents had with me as a Black man that they didn't have as Black women. There is a different set or a different treatment of me as a Black man that is identified through statistical analysis and data as it relates to opportunities and access. Black women tend to have a greater level of access to certain things than Black men do. Now, treatment of Black women and the narratives that go along with Black women are very different. But when we look at those things, those become very real things. And so when I look at myself as a Black man in America, that becomes something that I don't want to lose out on. So I'm not fighting to be separated, but I am fighting to be you've heard the melting pot. I don't want to be a melting pot. I want to be a tossed salad in America. They talk about America as a melting pot where everything just becomes one. I want to be uniquely defined because my experiences, my contributions, and my historical perspectives of me being a Black man in America are very important to me, if that makes sense. And I don't think that there is a negative when I look at, and I think that it's about how you view really a perspective of diversity, because I think that even my father, biological father, often says, his last name, I took my mom's last name, his last name is McLaughlin. So the story on my father's side of the family was that we are Black Irishmen. And he, as a Black Irishman, and he would fight for that Black Irishman as a McLaughlin to be very important. He wore the handlebar mustache and all of these different things that were very important. There were things that they did that were very Irish that I thought, you're weird, dude, on this. My family, this family is weird. but it was just the idea of them loving the fact that that was a part of who they were, and they wanted to embrace that as a part of their culture. And I thought it was, interesting. The older I get, I can better understand why they find it important to say, hey, we're Black Irishmen. And when you begin to get into the stories of how they got here and how their connection is to Ireland, then okay, this is something to celebrate. And for me, those differences and those nuanced approaches toward identifying race, the fact, as one of our callers said about Kamala, more than one box can be checked with Kamala because she does have an Indian, I think it's Indian if I'm not correct, descent and a Jamaican descent. So she is what we would call biracial here. There is a thing that when we grew up as kids that we were told 1% makes you whole. Have you ever heard that before?
No.
Okay. So these are conversations in Black America that happen that white America are oblivious to. Because what would happen is that we would have a relative that might be, Black, and they have a white parent as well. So they would come in, their hair would be different, their skin was a little bit lighter, and those types of things. And so we would have these conversations like Kamala, like, so is this child Black? Is my cousin Black, or is my cousin white? And some people say he's both Black and white. But in our community, the conversation would be 1% of African American makes you an African American. And when we see that, we also see that take place for a long time. And it's so different now. We saw those representations be consistent in media. We saw those representations be consistent on things like commercials and television shows, and where they were allowed, hey, if you're Black, then, these things. But now we see such a diversity in how people express themselves. And one of the things that I like, and this is going to go completely the different direction, but I want to say this. One of the things that I'm really enjoying right now is, if you've seen commercials, do you remember what the family used to look like when they would show these, like a Tide commercial? The family, we always would see this beautiful white family, very attractive woman, attractive men, these beautiful kids on a Tide commercial. And then they said, oh, we're going to diversify the commercials. And then you would see a Black man with a white woman and these, blended racial kids. And oftentimes it was a fair-skinned Black man, and now we're seeing Black people. When I say Black people, I'm talking about people who have dark skin, with folks who are white, or just, and those things are absolutely beautiful. But this is how I think the changing of America has come. And even with the conversations about who this vice president lady is and her defining herself, I think it's very important that we allow people to identify and define themselves. And that's a kickback from my own, from where we came from, where we said that 1% makes you whole. I think it's important that people are allowed the opportunity to define themselves in a manner that is comfortable, that expresses their history, because histrionics and their historical and their perspective and their experiences really help them to identify who they are. Do you feel those concepts of race and the importance of those things are lost in in white communities or in white spaces? Because I think my conversations that I've had with other friends of mine that were white, they don't see those things as very important as well. Do you think is there a reason for that, I guess, is my question.
Is there a reason for people not placing an importance on
race,
descent and race?
Descent and race, yes.
I don't know. I don't think there's as much of an emphasis on it in white communities. But a lot of whites come from Europe, and that's kind of its own thing. Whereas, like, each individual country is obviously very unique and very different, and it's kind of a fun niche thing, put in the 23andMe and see, oh, I'm this percentage German and this percentage English and blah blah blah.
You might be surprised what your percentages are, right?
Yeah. But no, I don't think there's as much emphasis on it, and I think that's part of where my hang up is in the why do people care so much? Because it's like, well, why do people care so much?
Well, I think, because for a long time, many Blacks didn't want to be Black. there was no benefit to being black. But I think now understanding, having the history lesson and having the idea of morality and building pride into the idea of being a black man is has changed the narrative in terms of how people see it and how people view it. And so I think that when we look at it, and also, so I want to say this. So we were talking about Kamala, and I was telling you a story about my family is like the Rainbow Coalition with all of the diversity that lies inside of it. But experience is so important when we talk about bringing together your race and your experience. It makes a big difference because I have another set of family, another side of the family who is biracial, but they were not raised with their black father. They were raised with their white mother, and they went to a white school. They lived in a white community, and although they are biracial, their experiences and how they have lived life have been predominantly white. And so people were offended on the other side of the family when they were like, well, we're white. And they were like, no, you're not white, you're biracial. I'm like, yes, but in addition to race, your experience has a great place and a great part to play, how you were raised and the experiences that you raised in terms of how you identify yourself.
I think that's pretty accurate.
So what were you going to say? Because I think, that doesn't. So what's the difference, though? I mean, so if my experiences of where I came from were glim, and it represents this overcoming growth of identity and self perspective and achievement, then you could understand that you would be excited about that. And I think that when I have this conversation about race, that is the thing that I love. Go ahead.
Here's a question for you. Do you think that those conversations of the history and the overcoming of obstacles leads some to hopelessness, and these obstacles are still perceived to be faced? There's no fixing it, so I might as well just not even try.
Well, I think that those obstacles and those stories are the things that we need to get back to, because I think that those are the things that led to great achievements, from becoming from where we were, from the annals of despair, to having a black president or an African American woman that is now running for president. Those stories of overcoming, those stories of emerging from dark places, is the thing that I think that we've lost as we become more integrated in a society that doesn't view race as important. Some of those stories are lost on African American youth, and I think that is one of the things that why we have had so many great achievements. There has been a turning of the dial or a turning of the needle because those conversations, those stories. A griot is an individual in Africa that is responsible for sharing that history. The griots that African Americans experience or have had here in the country that share those stories, the testimonies of overcoming, the testimonies of where we were, that show a transitioning from dark to light, are the things that we are losing or missing in our community, that are showing that are the reason why we're having this turn of achievement. And I think that once we get back to understanding that history is important, that's why we can't ban these books, in my opinion, from having young people read them, because they show us a progression from where we were in days of degradation and darkness to a life and a future that is emerging with hope and prosperity and the ability for great achievement. And so I think it's very important. I want you all to think about it. How have your experiences as a person of whatever particular race shaped how you view yourself in the skin that you're in? This is Kareem. I'm tuning off. Take care of yourselves and each other. Grace and peace.